topics coming up. It's a self-contained session, so welcome. And those of you who have been attending the series live or catching up in between on the recordings, welcome to all of you as well. Just a quick note, as always, that we're recording this for people to listen to, as I just mentioned, but your images and voices will not be recorded. However, you can participate using the chat function, which is where you should put any technical difficulties and I'll mention if we do any exercises, you can use the chat function. Questions that you have along the way should go in the Q&A section, but I won't be looking at until the end of the session. So yeah, so I think that gets us started. Hope everyone's doing well, and let me do a screen share. Oh, first, let me stop my phone from ringing. Excellent. And we'll get started. Great, so here we are discussing today strengthening your LinkedIn profile. Typically when I do these sessions, we have a range of people in the room. I'll get some more details on that in a moment, but we try and make this a one size fits all, whether you're relatively new to LinkedIn or you've been using it for a while and are just here for updates. We hope that the material will be relevant and useful. I'm Christine Valenza-Shin. For those of you who haven't been here, I'm class of '84, and I'm the Senior Associate Director for our Advising and Programs team within Beyond Barnard, which some of you knew is either the Office of Career Development or Barnard Career Services in your time. And as always, a reminder that this is part of a larger series we're doing this summer called Summer Colloquium. We are actually, this is the 4th week, so we're nearing the halfway point, both in our series and in the Summer Colloquium. And we've been having a great time presenting all of this. It's spurred us to get a lot of our materials and presentations online and bring back a variety of alumni around different professions in graduate school. So it's been it has been a great conversation so far, and it will continue through mid-August. And then in between, we're starting to make some plans for the fall as well. So that's where we're at. Today's happy place. Hold on, need to let the dog out. Today's happy place is inspired by my holiday weekend. I left the state for the first time in 3.5 months to a very quiet country home of a friend, actually a friend from Columbia days, and there were just a few of us, and it was really great to be somewhere different. And this isn't a picture from his actual farm, but there is a lovely little babbling brook, which is one of my happy places. We've been there many times over the years, and the sound and the sights. So again, as we head into talking about your job search and specifically LinkedIn, which can stress people out, we'll just take a moment here to take a deep breath, relax, focus, and then move into our content. We're staying in the happy place a little longer. There we go. Let's start. Yeah. So today we're talking about the LinkedIn profile. And as I've mentioned in previous weeks, last week we discussed cover letters, and the week before that, resumes. And so this is the last of a sort of 3-part mini series here. Together, these 3 things, your LinkedIn profile, your resume, your cover letters, are tools in your job search toolbox that you use to present yourself effectively throughout the job search process. So next week, we'll head into networking, followed by interviewing and, sort of more active parts in a way of the job search. But so LinkedIn, looking at LinkedIn profiles will help us tie together a lot of what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. So now we are going to look at a poll as soon as my screen, there's something about the screen sharing process that seems to make delay happen in this. So Lacey's going to launch the poll. I just want to get a sense of where everyone's at in terms of their usage of LinkedIn. So take a second to answer these 2 questions. Great. Okay. We'll leave things open, but start looking at it. So which of the following best describes the current state of your LinkedIn profile? So it looks like the majority are in definitely the majority are in, have a profile and have used the site at least occasionally. Our highest number, 30% profile, is mostly up to date and you complete and you use the site comfortably and when needed. Great, but we do have a handful with no LinkedIn account at all, and so I'll try and make some pointers along the way for getting started, and then a few of you, and then almost 20% have an account, but it's incomplete or you rarely use the site. So as you can see, we have a sort of a whole range in front of us, and we'll do what we can to accommodate. So then specifically honing in on the profile photo, 22% of you don't have one, and a smallest percentage, outdated or hard to see clearly, or it's too casual. And most of you fall in the okay or good, and yay for the 6 of you who are happy with your profile. That's always good. Okay, great. Thank you for participating in that. That gives me a good sense of where we're at. Great. Okay, so I forget how I get this to disappear from my screen. All right, good. Okay, so a few opening thoughts. A couple of different ways of thinking about the LinkedIn profile. All right, in some ways it combines facets of both cover letters and resumes. All right, which we'll see as we start looking at the different sections. And especially when LinkedIn started out, it was viewed as a way to, in many ways, supplement your resume. It's more space, got more categories. It has obviously digital capabilities that most people's resumes don't. And then it's important, as always, as we've talked through this series, is to think about your audience. So generally, one typical thing that happens is that you apply for a position either through uploading your application or emailing a resume and or cover letter. And those are generally the first things that prospective employers look at. But usually once you've made that first cut out of the big pile, employers at some point as they're starting to narrow down people, who they want to talk to, who they want to interview, will look at your LinkedIn profile for further information and to get a better sense. Not everybody, but it's a pretty routine thing. So one set of people that's going to be looking at your LinkedIn profile are people that you've already reached out to, made contact with, and that's true as well as people you're reaching out to in a networking capacity. So you want to keep that in mind as you think about what to update, what to include on your LinkedIn profile, is who's going to be looking at it and when. And if you were to apply for something and not have a LinkedIn profile, we'll talk about this more later, but this can be seen as a sign of lacking, web or social networking savvy. And this definitely can play into ageism. So to whatever extent the bias is that older people are not as comfortable with social media, that can be highlighted by not having a LinkedIn profile or having a very incomplete LinkedIn profile. So definitely something to think about. There are exceptions to that. There are industries that use LinkedIn more than others. But it's something to keep in mind if you're debating how, whether you want to have a LinkedIn profile or not, and how up to date you, or whether you want to expand your use of it. And then the other part, this is the more sort of passive part on your part, is that once your profile is there, recruiters and hiring managers can, they routinely search LinkedIn proactively for candidates. Probably more true, a few months back when we were in a tight hiring market, but still it's routine for people who are looking for new talent to use LinkedIn. And so that's another thing to keep in mind is, and we'll talk about some pointers here and there about, what are some of the things recruiters and hiring managers are looking for that can help you be come up in a search. And one of the main things is that the more active you are on LinkedIn, the more likely you are to come up in a search. So if you've been on LinkedIn for a while but have been very quiet and somebody did a search today, you might not come up in their search. You might not be in the top part of their search. But if you from here or recently have become more active and take steps to be on LinkedIn more routinely, that can also help your chance of coming up higher in a search. So what we're going to look at today is relatively few slides. I'm going to quickly give you an overview of the different profile sections and some best practices. And then we're going to actually hop over to LinkedIn and look mostly at my profile so that I can show you some of the editing tips and other features. LinkedIn is constantly adding and renaming and reordering features, which is great. It's a very dynamic site. Not the most intuitive site in the world, so both of those things tend to keep us in business. So there's always sort of new information. Every time I go on, I learn something new or get confused by something new. So we'll take a look at that and then do a quick summary, and then we'll do a little bit of practice to make sure you're walking away with something that can get you started on your profile. So the first section has been called various things, but at the moment LinkedIn is calling it your intro. And this is the sort of box of information up at the top of your profile, and we'll be looking at it very soon, which has your photo in it. Okay. And just a few quick tips on that. You absolutely should have a photo. Those of you, quite a few of you didn't have one yet. And what you're aiming for is a head and shoulders, shoulders up shot, or mostly your head shot. Some sort of solid background, not boring though. Shooting a picture of yourself against a white wall tends to end up looking like a passport photo. So a colored wall, wood paneling. I've seen people have a natural background, go outside and take a picture in front of, green leaves, something like that. So interesting, but not distracting. All right. And then a professional look, whatever that means for your profession. But what that does mean is you're looking to not have a candid looking photo, not have you, in a photo where you're hanging out at the beach, unless of course that's your profession. But those are the basic things. And LinkedIn has lots of stats about the fact that profiles with photos, not only do more people look at them, but they spend more time on them. So it's definitely important. However, I will say you don't want to let the photo be the hang up. And I've worked with a number of people where this has been the issue. So if you don't feel like you have a photo or you're not sure how to upload it, don't get stuck on that. Work on the other parts of it and help, use Google or other people to help you figure out how to do it. And you also don't need to wait for a formal photo. Especially with the quality of smartphones today, you can have somebody take a photo on your, with a digital camera, obviously, or with a phone camera and upload that there. Those are fine quality to use for LinkedIn. And then if you later get an opportunity to do a more formal photo through your work or through a conference or something like that, then that's great as well. And then there's something called a background, which is sort of like the banner or I forget what they call it on Facebook, but it's that sort of horizontal picture behind your profile picture. And a lot of people keep the generic. You'll see when we get to my profile that I have yet to fill in a background. I always feel like it's good to show that even somebody who's on LinkedIn and talks about it as much as I do is not completely up to date. Generally speaking, this is an opportunity to showcase your interests, your work, your personality. Again, it's not, you don't want to let this hang you up on not using LinkedIn or not getting around to other tasks, but it's something to think about. I'll show you a couple of examples when we get on. And then there's a headline. And this is it defaults to the title at your current or most recent job that you've listed in your experience section. But the key thing to know about the headline is you can edit it. You do not have to use that default. And especially if you're job searching or looking to shift roles or shift sectors, you may not want to use your current title. Your current title will obviously still be on your profile and it'll be close to the top. So there's no worry that people won't realize what you're either doing now or most recently have done, but you might want to use the headline opportunity to show a little bit more closely what you're looking for. So for instance, if you have dual interests or if you are considering a role or career shift or change, you could make that your headline. So I threw in an example here. And this could be in particular if somebody were, moving away from law or had made a career change away from law, but you don't want to discount that experience. And in fact, that experience can be very valuable, but you want to sort of lead with what you're looking for work in. There can be lots of different examples. The about section, which used to be called the summary. As with a lot of things on LinkedIn, only the top part of it is initially visible. There's a, we'll see in a minute, there's a click for more button on many of the sections. So again, from that audience point of view, you need to think about you need to think about somebody looking only at those first 3 lines, right? So you want to have a strong lead. The about section, there's a couple different ways of thinking about it. Similar to how we talked last week about cover letters being a bridge or a framework. This can help, it's right up at the top, and it can help whoever's looking at your profile frame how they see the rest of your profile. So again, especially if you have experience that's varied or gaps or shifts within it, the about section can help tie it together and sort of set the tone and sort of frame how you want to be viewed. Other people use it primarily to highlight key skills and accomplishments. Sometimes people use bullets. Sometimes it's more commonly a paragraph, but I have seen people use bullets instead. And especially if you're looking for something new or different, you can't customize it. You don't want to be constantly changing your about section. You can tweak it here and there. So it's not like customizing a cover letter, but as you are broadly conducting your job search, and if you're seeing certain key skills and experiences that employers are looking for in the jobs you're applying to, you can definitely incorporate that into the about section. And then the more another sort of aspirational way of thinking about it is, you get sort of total editorial control over this. So you can definitely use it to look forward. If you're looking to move up, if you are looking to move to a different type of role, if you're moving to look to a different sector, you can use the about section to frame that. And again, the example often is to lead with what you're looking for and then follow with some of your background. So, a lot of people's about sections used to be super long. I've noticed over the years they've gotten shorter. They're often 2 short paragraphs, sometimes 1 short paragraph, sometimes a little bit more than that. But often when I work with people on these sections, I'll say, let's write a first paragraph about what you're seeking or what you're currently doing that you want to keep doing. Make that the lead, and then follow up with some explanation, some framing of things you've done in the past or transferable skills from your past roles and past experiences that fit in. And okay, and then the next section, the next large section after the intro is generally called your background, and then it's broken into other sections, and the biggest section there is experience, and this would be aligned with the experience, the main experience section of your resume. The key thing to keep in mind, though, is that LinkedIn, and this has not changed over how long has LinkedIn been around? 10 years now, maybe longer. This has not changed. LinkedIn continues to require, as it says right here, a single reverse chronological listing of your experience. And so it's less flexible than the resume method we talked about a couple weeks ago, where you can create a sort of more relevant labeled section where you can highlight the things you most want them to look at. And so logistically, this creates a little bit more of a, for some people, creates a little bit more of a challenge in terms of how you list things and what you want to include. And it's just one of the constrictions of LinkedIn, but of course people reading it also know that. One way to get around this is you don't have to strictly segment your experience into different sections. And I did notice that LinkedIn, instead of calling this work experience, is simply calling it experience, and which in a way just sort of gives their seal of approval for you. If you want to fill in, it could be filled there. Storms here today, but it's not looking too stormy at the moment. A lot of people use bullets the same way they do on their resume, but there are a fair number of people who go with a paragraph style just to mix it up. So again, that's your choice. And generally speaking, I did a quick look this morning as I was just kind of checking to make sure I was completely up to date. And it seems on most people's profiles, 4 to 5 of the most recent experiences are initially visible, and then people have to click for more. So that kind of can naturally echo what we did on the resume, which is your more recent experiences tend to be more detailed, have more bullets. And so when I say make them count, whatever your top, most recent experiences are, that's where you do want to put some thought into those bullets and what skills you're highlighting, what experiences you're highlighting. Okay. And then there's additional sections in the background. The important thing to know about education is that, and I'll show you how to do this in a moment, but, and this is, I think, a new feature, you can actually change the order of your education. So you don't have to list it in reverse chronological. And so that can be helpful because sometimes people want to highlight a particular degree, or they want to highlight, say, Barnard and Columbia because it's more prestigious than whatever else is in there. Or maybe they want to not highlight Barnard and Columbia because they were a philosophy major and they don't want to overemphasize that, or maybe they do, so it gives you a little bit of leeway in a way that the work section doesn't. And dates are optional. So just as we spoke about with resumes, it has become fairly customary for people to leave off dates of education to, sort of conceal or make it less obvious exactly how old they are. So there's a little bit of flexibility built in there. And then there's a space for licenses and certifications and for volunteer experience, which again, you can make that a separate section, especially if it is very different or from your work experience. Some people just use the volunteer section to sort of round themselves out and show some of the causes they care about. But others of your volunteer experience you might want to include in the more prominent section. Okay, and then the last big section I really want to focus on before we hop over to LinkedIn is the skills and endorsement section. This has changed a lot over the years. Right at the moment, this seems to be going up. You can choose up to 50 skills, but only the top 3 will be visible. So you want to think clearly, again, as I keep saying, think about if someone's scrolling quickly through your LinkedIn profile, they're initially only going to see 3. So which 3 do you want them to see? What are your most important, most marketable skills that you're focusing on? And there's 2 editing functions here, which I'll show you in a moment. You can either add a new skill to get started on this, or to add if you want to start adding more. And then there's the blue edit pencil, which allows you to reorder or delete skills that are no longer relevant or that you don't want to highlight. There's a feature called endorsements. This used to, any of you who've been on LinkedIn for a couple of years, this used to be the part where the little photo of the people who endorsed you would pop up. So it ended up looking like this funny little bar graph. In general, recruiters, employers don't find the endorsement feature hugely helpful. So I wouldn't say these are super important, and you do have capability of changing that. You can hide that completely, or you can sort of control which skills people can endorse you. I'll show you more on that in a moment. The key thing that is really important to understand about this skills section, though, is that recruiters and headhunters and some hiring managers have a special there's a sort of recruitment version of LinkedIn, a special license or format. And one of the ways they can search, and this has become somewhat more common, I think, in recent years, is they can literally search your skill section, or the skill section generally of a lot of people, and use that as the focus, for who they're looking for. That can be their initial narrowing down. So you definitely want to take advantage of this skills section. I would even argue that if you've got them to fill up all those 50 skills, you can use variations of different wordings of the same thing. But even if you feel like you've already said something about a specific skill in your about section or your experience section, it's definitely worth taking the time to click, add add some of your specific ones. And it's something you want to circle back to and keep updating, you know, if you change your focus or if you gain new skills or if you want to drop some skills from the mix. Okay, and then there's just a few additional profile sections. And you can add these. There's a little add profile section in the intro box where you can see what these other possible sections are, and I'll show you those in a few minutes, but some of them include accomplishments, recommendations, which carry more weight than the endorsement feature I just talked about. All right, and you know, the advice varies, but I've heard the most consistent advice I hear is if you can get 2 recommendations for your most recent experiences, does not necessarily have to be, it's great if it's your current experience, but that doesn't always work, especially if you don't want to call attention to the fact that you might be looking or open to other opportunities. But you know, you don't need to get 10 recommendations from every job you've ever had. You don't need to focus too much on getting recommendations from old jobs unless they're newly relevant. But it's not a bad idea to reach out and have a couple people recommend you. And you have editorial control, as in you can ask someone to write a recommendation for you, but it doesn't go straight to your profile. You have to approve it before it's visible. So. And then there's a section on interests where you can show what companies, groups, and schools you follow. That both, this does 2 things. It both influences what things show up in your feed on LinkedIn, you know, if a school makes a post, or if a company makes a post, or if one of the groups you're in has some new information, that will, the ones you've selected will show up on your feed. It's also just a final way to sort of show what you're interested in and you know, what your career interests are, your different affiliations are. And just a little note here that at the bottom of that section, you're able to access an ad, and I'll show you that in a moment as well. All right, so I keep promising to show you things, and I think it's time, yes, to do some editing tips and additional features. So I'm gonna duck out of this for a moment and go to LinkedIn, but I'm still screen sharing. Excellent. Okay, so this would be the LinkedIn homepage. So we've got me in the corner and the various groups, and then your news feed. This was changed a few years back. It sort of echoes Facebook a little bit more. And then I think I've mentioned this feature a couple times. This popped up probably a couple weeks after we all went into lockdown. Here's who's hiring right now. So LinkedIn is doing this, Indeed is doing this, Handshake is doing this. It's helpful for, you know, to keep an eye on what's going on. But I want to spend most of the time on the profile, and so I'm going to go to my profile to show you the various editing functions. Okay, so this is that intro, that open box, right? This is the generic background, and you can see, as with all social media, LinkedIn is helpfully nudging me to upload a photo or choose a custom image to support a cause. And I'll show you what other people, you can do a variety of things here. A lot of my colleagues have a photo of Barnard or Columbia here, and I've noticed a lot of my former colleagues who've moved to other universities have done that. Other people use a stock image. I could put my happy place up here if I wanted. I could put my picture of a road going through shadows and trees and coming out into the sunlight. There's various things you can do with it, and you do that by clicking on the little camera, and it will either give you a pre-formatted one or allow you to upload an image or photo from your computer. This is the profile picture. Mine's getting a little old. I should probably update it at one point. I'd say I've got the neutral background, I've got the head and shoulders. I think the paint, you know, particular background, you know, it's not the most exciting color in the world, but better than plain white. And this is what I said about the headline. This is the thing that can be edited. So it's defaulting to my title, which works for me. I'm not actively looking for anything else. But those of you who are or looking to move up or over or shift, you might want to consider. And a couple other things. This is relatively new, I think. I just noticed this the other day when I started preparing for this presentation. This is a new section. I'll click on it just to show you how it works, but you can indicate your willingness, and then you can see who share with recruiters only. So people using LinkedIn Recruit. So a lot of people I could see might choose that because you don't want necessarily everyone in your network or people you work with to know that you're actively looking. So a couple different things. And LinkedIn has responded over the years to the criticism and the feedback about privacy. And so I'll talk a little bit about more at the end, but in almost every section, there's information about privacy. And I encourage you to sort of, take a look at those and see. Okay. And then just on a functional thing, every section has the blue edit pencil. All right. So, so you can see you have to have a headline, but you can edit it. So I could take that out and I could put in something about being a visionary leader or whatever else I chose to focus on. Okay. And then you can control whether you show education and which school you want to highlight, etc. Okay. So, and you can edit your contact information. So you have a lot of control over all of this. And so the blue pencil is your key. I'm going to discard any changes. And then I just wanted to note this is how you can add a profile section. So as I already went over, you've got your intro, your about, and then this is also relatively new. You can feature and control whether they want, do you want to put right in your profile, your recent posts, any articles, any links, that type of thing. And then as we talked about, there's the background section, work, education, licenses and certifications, and volunteer experience. So you can add any of those or add to any of those, okay? Skills, accomplishments, additional information, that's I think where the recommendation comes in. So just so you know the functionality of, if you want to make changes, that's how you do it up through this section. Okay. All right. So here's my about section. And as I mentioned, you see just the first, actually, it's not even the first 3 lines. It's the first two lines and a couple of words. So if anybody wants to see more about me, they need to do that. And I followed the two paragraph system. This talks about what I currently do, and then this gives a nod and tries to frame a little bit of my past experience. I've made a few shifts over the years, and so it's a way of trying to tie together, thread it together a little bit, connect it to what I'm currently doing, and that's how I chose to approach it. It's not the be all end all, and one thing I definitely encourage you all to do as you're either creating your profile or tweaking it, is to look at other people's profiles, especially within your field, and see what you like, see what other people are doing that you think is effective. This is just some data and information here, and this is my recent activity. So I posted yesterday about a new initiative, hopefully some of you saw it, where alumni can post a short-term project or job for students to help fill in the gap of all of the canceled or reduced internships and various other things. And again, this is just, I think this can get taken out of how what people see, but you don't control the content directly on that. Here's the experience section I was talking about, and reverse chronology. All right, so when the plus sign is if I got a new job or a new thing that I wanted to add, I can put that there. You can click that and it brings up the window for you. Okay, and at the bottom, as I said, everyone, you make choices about whether you want to share that, and you can also learn more about sharing that and when. Okay, and under experiences, you must put the company. Location is optional, and the dates for experiences are required. Right, and it asks you a couple of other questions here. Okay. So mine's a little tricky because I've worked for Barnard in various capacities. So it takes a little bit of wrangling to get everything to make sense. I work for Beyond Barnard now, which used to be the Office of Career Development, had a brief stint as interim executive director. I worked for the Athena Leadership Lab, so I've had a number of different roles at Barnard, which can be confusing. And then it goes back far enough to show, as I've mentioned before, starting out life as a teacher and working a couple summers at Teach for America. So, and again, you can see it shows about, 4 or 5 of my experiences. And then education, I just wanted to reiterate what I said in the slide, which is that these lines mean you can change the order. So that's an interesting, so you'll notice there were no lines up above under experience. You're not allowed to change the order. Those dates are required and LinkedIn does the ordering for you. But here, if I wanted to downplay NYU and upplay Barnard, I could do that. Or if for some reason I wanted to highlight my lovely high school back in Durham, New Hampshire, Oyster River High School, I could play around with that. So, and then as always, you can add, or you can use the blue pencil to go in and I could add more to my Barnard information if I chose to. Okay. Well, I've got a couple of licenses and certifications here related to assessments that we talked about briefly. And then here's the skills section. I want to point this out. A couple of people have been asking about this. You can take skill quizzes. I took a look at this the other day, and basically a lot of it is sort of technical and digital stuff, but if you look through this list and you have some competency here and you want to earn a badge, I definitely would check this out. Again, it's a relatively new feature, so I'm not sure how useful it is to recruiters if they're taking advantage of it, but just wanted to point that out. And you've got two editing functions here. You can add a new skill, all right? So it gives me suggestions, but for instance, if I wanted to, I was looking at this, I've got career counseling, but our new leadership, well, it's 2.5 years now, they prefer advising. So I can add career advising instead of that. Okay, so now career advising is down here, but then if I want to take away that career counseling, what I can do is go to the edit and I can bring up career advising with these little bars, bring it up here and bump. Whoop, okay, that didn't work. This is the danger of live demos. Where'd it go? Oh, interpersonal skills. It moved it to the top of that, but not to my top 3. You know what, I probably have to get rid of, probably have to move career counseling down. Okay, and then move career advising up. Let's see if that works, otherwise I'll give up. Yeah, all right. I'll leave you to it, or I'll figure out more in the meantime and fill you in next week. So clearly it's not working for me. I want to discard my changes. Okay, but you can see how you can move things up. Oh, sorry, and let me go back to one more thing, which is, 50 skills might seem like a lot. I've got 24. I could add 26 more. But one thing that's recommended by recruiters is that using similar wording for the same things can be helpful, because you never know what search term they're going to put in. So there is some, so for instance, putting in career advising, career counseling, professional development counseling, you can put related terms in, and it will feel repetitive, but remember, they're only able to see the top 3. So it's only going to look repetitive if someone really delves in. And that's where that search function can help you, because buried in your long list of skills might be the one thing that a particular employer is looking for. Okay. And then you see I have a couple of recommendations, and you can ask people for a recommendation. And then this was the intersection I was talking about. So this shows the various groups I belong to, and then I can switch that over to, I can look at what companies I follow, what schools I follow, all right? And you can take those away, or you get to those by going to the page, and then you can unfollow something. Okay. So that's sort of a quick tour with a couple of more tips of various things. We're going to talk more, we got some questions in advance about privacy issues, and I know I always get a lot of questions about that, and people have a lot of questions. We are putting together a one sheet to address some of those, because there's a lot of nuanced answers to privacy issues. But I did want to point out while we're here that the privacy locations are under here. So you go to the little me up in the right-hand corner, and you go to settings and privacy, and it's quite extensive, but it basically walks you through the whole thing, and it allows you to change, there's got all sorts of information, privacy, your account, etc. So, and I have definitely had a couple of appointments with people where we did just walk through the privacy settings together and sort of talked about the different merits of that. So as I said, we're putting together a one sheet on that. My goal is to have Lacey send that out to you next week when she sends the new link and the recording. And then we'll talk more about some of these privacy issues when it comes up to networking next week. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation and finish up and then take some questions. Okay, so just a couple of final key takeaways, mostly reiterating things I've already told you. Definitely add a photo, an about section, and more detail to your experience section if you haven't already. I'd say those are the key things for those of you who are looking to get started or are looking to complete your profile or to update your profile. Take a look at your photo, take a look at your about section, take a look at the experience descriptions, and take a look at that skills section. I should have added that as well. You still want to, in the same way we talked about with resumes and cover letters, you want clear, concise, direct language. There's more space on LinkedIn, so there's a temptation to fill it out and use up all that space. But keep in mind, again, audience, people are still skimming quickly, so you want to keep that in mind. And how can you convey the information you want to convey in a compelling and efficient way? Mentioned this, I think, earlier, but as you are going through your job search, as you ramp up your job search, if there's certain key things you keep seeing, phrases, skills they're looking for, you're not tweaking this every time the way you are a cover letter or even some of the bullets in your resume, but you can update it if you see certain things over and over again. And think about that recommendations feature. Think about if there are former managers, colleagues, or even people you've supervised in the past who might be able to write a recommendation for you. That can be a helpful addition to this. Right? And some of these additional sections that I didn't spend a lot of time on are an opportunity to sort of give a fuller picture, and round out more information for anybody who's looking. Okay. So, and then a couple of FAQs. So this is always the big one. I get this, not a lot, but some. The answer is no, you don't have to use LinkedIn, but it's been around, like I said, 10, 11 years. I might even be underestimating that. And it started out small and very business oriented, only certain industries. And there's still industries that are underrepresented. You don't find, a lot of doctors in particular have their own LinkedIn, so you don't necessarily find a ton of doctors here. I'd say higher ed, a little bit. Law has a very sort of standoffish, very traditional use of LinkedIn. Some of the arts, specific arts things aren't represented a lot, but a big segment of both the private and nonprofit sector use LinkedIn, and it is a great tool, to find people, which we'll look at mostly next week, and to be found, which we talked a little bit about today. And if you do opt out of it, it can slow your job search. There's certain things that are just so much easier to do on LinkedIn in terms of identifying companies and identifying connections that it can slow things down. But if either for privacy reasons or philosophical reasons or just practical reasons, you decide not to use LinkedIn, what you might want to consider is in order to counter that sense that you're not comfortable online, you might think about how else can you create a web-based presence. So for some of you, it could mean using another social media platform, especially if your field is particularly reliant on it. So for instance, a lot of visual and arts are on Instagram, so you might want to think about that. A lot of media folks are on Twitter. Obviously lots of other people too, but there are other social media platforms that are kind of the lifeblood of certain fields. And so if you're not on LinkedIn, you might want to think about one of those. Or like I said, you can create your own website, which isn't super complicated. There's a lot of, platforms. And so then instead of sending people to your LinkedIn profile, you can put similar information, on it, but it would be closed only to those people you invite to see it. So Another question that comes up a lot, especially as some of you are attending this and then may, suddenly become more active, can that tip people off? And yes, it's possible if you've never been on LinkedIn and you're rarely there, and all of a sudden now you're changing your headline and your photo, that could be a tip off. You can use your privacy settings. What I'll often say to people is, while you're working on your profile, you can sort of shut your privacy settings down, make sure people aren't getting alerted every time you make a little or big change. But then once you are actively job searching, you want to be a little bit more open and a little bit more accessible. So at that point, you need to be prepared to answer questions, and you can either tell the truth, or you could tell a version of the truth, like, of course, in these uncertain times, just wanted to update it, or Barnard sent me a link to a webinar. It seemed like a good time to update it. You can give any number of answers, but you may get the question. Okay. All right, let's do a quick little practice. So I'm giving you a choice. Take a second, draft it, think it, and then if you want to, share it in the chat section, not the Q&A, but the chat section. Either write a new headline for yourself, or write sort of the first 2 or 3 lines of your about section. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a draft, but I'll stop talking for about 30 seconds, let you do that. And then any of you who are comfortable, you can start sharing it. Okay, go ahead and share that in the chat if you would like. I'll take a look at it in just a moment, but let me wrap things up here in the meantime. Oops. Okay, so as always, we take a look at next steps. So as I said, we've reached the halfway point in our series. And so we've got 4 more topics coming up. You're welcome to join us for any or all. So next week, we'll continue looking a lot at LinkedIn, although not exclusively. We'll be talking about networking in general. And then we'll look at interviewing, negotiating, and finally, once you have that new job, what can you be doing to look ahead and continue to manage your ongoing professional development so that the next job search is even easier. And as always, information about how to be in touch with us and how to make an advising appointment now or later. And the same old final slide is getting familiar to you now. If we can turn, no, it doesn't want to turn. Thanks and questions, and then my individual email as well as the general beyond Barnard. So let me stop sharing and take a look at what some of you shared in the chat. See if we've got some good examples. Yeah, awesome. Important point. The photo can exclude candidates based on age, race, etc. So there is there's an argument for putting something in your profile other than, so if you do not want to put your photo because of those bias concerns, which is completely valid, you could put a smaller photo of something else. I think the argument on LinkedIn is not to leave it blank, that little shadow person. So, but again, up to you. Okay, so I'm going to hope that, oh, great. Okay, good. Amanda gave me a tip on how to do the blue pin properly. If you click on the blue pin on the left side, you can unpin one of the top 3 skills. And then if you click on the blank pin on the left, oh, perfect. Thank you very much, Amanda, for pointing that out. And Deanna did as well. So you guys know more than I do, which is great. And Ariel said it as well. Look how smart you all are. Good. Okay. I'm going to assume some of these questions are going to find their way in, but let's just looking at people's headlines. Entertainment journalist, storyteller, and content pro looking for my next adventure. Agile learner and problem solver looking to transition to the investment team of an E&F or pension plan. Nice. Great. You've got some good stuff here. Excellent. Good. All right. So, for those of you who just drafted it, or if you're tweaking it, these are good. These are all good. And I'll often make the offer when I'm working with people on their LinkedIn profile. You can do a draft elsewhere. Obviously, you don't have to draft it on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to go over it in an appointment or as a follow-up in an email. So, good stuff. Okay. All right. Let's look at the Q&A and see what we can get through in the next 7 minutes. What job industries are most likely to perceive not having a complete LinkedIn profile as a weakness? So I would say kind of I'd answer this sort of the way I was answering it before, which is looking at the fields that aren't as active on LinkedIn. So doctors in particular, healthcare in general is on LinkedIn. But I think, most private sector, most nonprofit places are going to expect you to have a LinkedIn profile. I guess another group that might not be as into LinkedIn would be some of your smaller, tech startups and things like that. I think they'd be on LinkedIn, but they might be more interested in where you're at on other social media. So if you have a particular one, feel free to add it to the queue, a particular field you're curious about. What does that mean to be active on LinkedIn? Great question. So a lot of it is what we're going to be what we talked about today, which is going and updating your profile, that every time you log on, that gets recorded by LinkedIn's logarithm. So if you start being on more regularly, and then as we're going to talk about next week, any of your networking activity, if you're routinely going on and searching for possible connections, building your network, building up the number of contacts. But it also means if you post, if you post in a group, or if you post an article, or even if you like something that somebody else posted, that can be that counts as well, as does the logging in and clicking on pages and profiles. It all gets counted into the logarithm that LinkedIn uses to determine who's active, what's going on, what prompts they feed you. It's both it's that same combination always with social media of useful and creepy at the same time, and you can fall on one side or the other there. For the about section, is the norm to use first person or third person? Are there norms around using certain right? I'd say, what did I even do? I think first person, I think it can be either. I feel like more people do first person on LinkedIn. I think it's more direct and personal, but it's interesting. But sometimes people cut and paste their professional bio, which is more often done in third person. So if I had to guess, I would say first person is more common, but third person is okay. I just finished grad school, PhD in the fall, listed on my LinkedIn a number of grants awards I received during that time. I'm now transitioning away from academia, so I expect I should pare those down significantly, eliminating smaller research grants, but leaving Fulbright, for instance. Any thoughts on how to manage that section? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like and this typically comes up if you're not focusing on academia. I think it's still nice to have those, and they're kind of tucked away. It's not a super prominent section. I mean, you can feature them more either in your experience or your education section. But so for instance, you could, I think there's a space on the education section where you could put the Fulbright to sort of highlight that, and you could keep some of the smaller awards in that separate section for accomplishments. Because it's still notable, even if people don't recognize them, or if it seems academically heavy, it still speaks to you being smart and accomplished and that type of thing. So, and I did not look carefully at how whether you have a lot of leeway in terms of how you order things in that section. But if you do have editorial control, you could, focus on the ones that sort of more clear title, something more understandable by non-academics. What is the best way to highlight numerous diverse roles in the same organization over 2 decades? How to highlight important out to organizations that would enhance my marketability, even if I was still linked to the same organization in HR terms. Yeah, this is tricky. It's hard to answer this in a generic way. It's a little bit about what I've dealt with. And so one of the ways I dealt with it, especially because the name of the, you know, office that I worked at has changed, as well as I have actually changed departments several times. So one thing I did was take away Barnard as the overall employer and instead put Beyond Barnard in as my employer, and then Barnard Career Development as, you know, so you can do that. You can sort of segment it out, to, you know, and put, instead of putting the overall employer as the title, put the department you worked for as the official name, and then that allows you a little bit more flexibility. But I probably have to look it over with you, myself or one of the other advisors, to sort of look at your specific situation. So it's a little bit of LinkedIn is a challenge with that. You know, you're sort of working within a template that has some flexibility, but not a lot. You mentioned there could be advantage to loading up on skills. I can easily get to 50. How do I get my top 3? Okay, so as we found from the comments, it's about pinning and unpinning. And so you pin the top 3 using the little blue pin icon. Okay. Any rules on the banner and photo, formal, informal? Should these show personality or be neutral? I would say it depends on your industry. If you're big law, big finance, you want to be more on the formal side. You know, smaller places, smaller places in general, you can be a little bit more. It kind of has to do with your industry, how formal or informal it is, what are your industry norms, what's your particular company. And again, if you are moving from, say, a more formal thing to a less formal thing, you could, you know, sort of loosen up a little bit in your photo or in your banner to reflect that. It's a subtle way to sort of reposition yourself. So. Hi, Christine. Am automatically a member of Beyond Barnard by participating in his memories, or do I have to join? And if so, how do I go about it? Let's see. By participating in this webinar, so you are not, so Beyond Barnard, so there's no sort of membership in Beyond Barnard per se. What you would be is, I believe, if you registered through Alumni Relations, you might not have been added to Handshake yet. If you're already in Handshake, you'd be part of Handshake, which is our Beyond Barnard's platform. And then in terms of LinkedIn and the groups, you do have to actively join the LinkedIn group. So we have 2 groups on LinkedIn. The Beyond Barnard group on LinkedIn is very new, and we haven't really promoted it, and so it's not very populated yet. We're going to push that out in the fall. And in the meantime, the biggest LinkedIn group is called Barnard College Alumni and Affiliates, and that you just have to click on and ask to join, and it gets approved. So it's not automatic. I don't have many contacts, about 100. Is that a problem? It's not a huge problem. I think it is something that if you are going to be doing some networking on LinkedIn, you should think, and we'll talk about this next week, you should think about growing your network. But there's no magic number. I think if you reach 500, you're called a super connector. There used to be some sort of silly designation. You know, it's the more contacts you have, the more potential contacts you have at places where you'd like to work. So there is some argument in favor of it, but a lot of people argue quality over quantity. This is not a site where you just want to be racking up contacts, because they're only going to be helpful to you if you have some sort of connection to them. It doesn't mean you have to meet everyone in person or have worked with everyone you're connected to, but we'll talk about this next week. You definitely want to personalize your note and talk about why they came to your attention and what you have in common. So, so I would say quality over quantity. Best way to approach cold messaging. We're going to talk about that next week when we talk about networking, because that's a big topic. Do you recommend copying and pasting the experience from your resume into your LinkedIn? I think you should. Yeah. I mean, it depends on how much you're customizing your resume bullets. You might go to a slightly more generic version of bullets if you have been customizing them to a specific job description. But yeah, there's if you like your bullets on your resume, no reason to add more work for yourself. How would you suggest wording experience on LinkedIn? Do we need to reiterate exactly what it says on the resume or phrase it differently? I don't think there's a big concern with phrasing it the same. Some people will mix it up just for interest, but there's not too many people who are going to be like holding your resume in one hand and looking at your LinkedIn in the other and saying, oh, she just used the same thing. You know, it's more, I don't think it's a big issue. So So I would use the same if you want, mix it up a little if you want. I've heard that using the standard blue LinkedIn background shows you are not putting in enough effort to modify the one. Yeah, it's another little sign. I'd say it's not as important as putting in a headline, a photo, and an about section, but don't let it be the holdup. But yeah, think about the background. You know, it's not that hard. If you don't know technically how to do it, someone you know should be able to walk you through it, including one of us. But yeah, it's relatively easy to add a banner, you know, that reflects something about you, whether it's the place you work or your industry in general, or just a sort of more neutral thing that, you know, or a more personal thing. So is there a preference between a sentence form, I am a seasoned editorial director, versus seasoned editorial director with a background in the about section? I mean, I have a slight preference for getting straight to the point, seasoned editorial director, but that's like the third person, first person thing. So I think in the about section, you just pick one and go with it, you know, first person or third person. Not seeing anything in Q&A section. Oh, yeah, sometimes people, I'm not sure how the Q&A section works, if everyone can see it or if it's sent just to myself and the co-host. So I'll try and read them more carefully. Marketing, somebody just said marketing. I'm not quite sure what that means. LinkedIn has algorithms that rate members, place them in a hierarchy based on their post activity. Can you please speak to those? I don't know a ton about the intricacies of their logarithms. I should say there used to be sort of a world of bloggers who wrote a lot about LinkedIn and the ins and outs of it. So it's definitely something worth Googling, especially if you have a specific question. Yeah, but I don't know a ton about their algorithms. So people might know, or I can do a little digging between now and then. Do you recommend using LinkedIn eye candy for bullets, etc.? Not sure what you mean by that, Laura. Maybe you could reiterate, give me a little more detail. What are your thoughts on the share with all LinkedIn members versus share with recruiter only? Does having the open to work photo frame seem too eager? I don't think it's too eager. I think it's a relatively new feature. I mean, I think at this moment in time, I think a lot of people are open to work, looking for work, you know, even if you're furloughed and are hoping to be able to go back, you know, a lot of people recognize you may not be able to. So I don't think this is the same as in a sort of typical quieter period of employment. So it's a judgment call. You might want to start by sharing with recruiters only. And recruiters often includes not just professional recruiters, but people within HR or even within an organization that are searching for team members. And it doesn't hurt. It is something they can search by. So, but happy to talk through your individual situation with you. Should the Long Island, should the LinkedIn chronology only go as far back as the resume? Can colleagues from further back than the 10 to 15 years still find us? Potentially. I don't think anybody who did find you would be surprised if you had left off some of your earlier experience. So I think if you have that same reason as on your resume for trying to lop off some of that early experience, I think that's fine. I am making the transition out of academia. Hello to all you who are also making this transition. I am open to a variety of roles, for instance, UX research in the private sector, program evaluation in the nonprofit sector. So I'm struggling with how to tailor my presentation to a broad audience while still being strategic. Help. Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges on LinkedIn is if you are open to things. I think that one way of thinking about it is something we talked about in the very first session, which is, hi, my name is Christine. I'm looking for opportunities in X, but I'm also open to Y, you know, so showing that you have a focus, but that you also have a secondary focus or you are open to. And what that does is you don't want to put out the I'm open to anything, because it's hard for people to help you and sort of take you seriously if there's not a focus. But on the other hand, you want to show some flexibility. So I feel like one answer to this is to look at those transferable skills, you know, that could work in this variety of roles, and really focus in on that. Another possibility is to use the about section to say, you know, in the private sector, interested in this, in the non-profit, you could be upfront about it, or you could choose one where you are more interested in working at the moment and sort of make that your focus in the short term. And then if you're not getting a lot of traction, if there's not a lot of hiring going on in that sector, you could flip it a little and sort of shift your focus. So, and I don't want to keep putting this off to one-on-one conversations, but sometimes, I mean, part of the challenge of LinkedIn is because it's a template, it takes some judgment calls and some nuance to sort of figure out how to make it best work for you. And sometimes that is better dealt with one-on-one. But you also can, you know, sort of explore, and I would definitely look at other people's profiles to see how they handled it, you know, and sort of get ideas from that as well. The new photo frame to me is branding people. History and current events prove these labels are suboptimal. While it may be helpful during these crazy days, can it possibly be viewed positively later on? I think the verdict is out on this. I mean, this is a big thing that happened 10 years ago with the last recession. Was the coincidence with the rise of digitalization of the job search led to all of these articles and concerns and sweeping statements by employers about, you know, what mattered. And you know, I feel like some of that has gone out the window this time because it's such a quick, sharp recession, that some of those old rules, but it's hard to say. And I do think you can take it away, right? Like if you put the new photo frame on that labels you, I think you could take it. Most of these things seem flexible. I'm not completely up to date on this particular feature, but so I think there's not a lot of absolutes at the moment. So, you know, some of this is just trial and error, and take your best guess and see what kind of feedback you get. So what's your advice on using an older photo that conceals your age just to get in the door? I'd say go for it, unless it's so blatant. It's kind of like, we just had this discussion, that's funny, over the weekend about dating sites, you know, and either lying about your age or using a significantly younger photo. It's one of those things, you just have to look at the trade-off of getting in the door versus then when they see you up close and personal on Zoom, in this case, usually. So yeah, so I wouldn't go back to, Lynn, I happen to know how old you are, so I wouldn't necessarily go back to your, you know, a college photo or when you were in your 20s. But yeah, if you can go back to something that, you know, 10 or 15 years ago still looks like you, but looks a little younger, that could be good. I have a lot of contacts that I don't actually know. I've been on LinkedIn for a while and not sure even how or when we connected. Should I delete folks I can't figure out? I wouldn't take the time unless you're bored. I would just concentrate on adding new people that you either know or sorry, the question bumped away from me. Yeah, I wouldn't waste time deleting people. I would just focus on adding new people, because you never know, and you could always potentially reach out to somebody and say, hey, LinkedIn used to show you when you connected and how you connected, and they took that information away. So yeah. Can you go over what Handshake is and how we join as older alum? I'm gonna wait. So Handshake basically is the platform that Beyond Barnard uses for three main things. We use it for events and event invitations. We use it for making appointments, and we use it for job postings. It is open to all students and alumni. The job portions of it is aimed mostly at current and graduating students, but there are some experienced higher job listings there, so it can be helpful there. And you can join just by going to the address that was on the last slide, which is barnard.joinhandshake. I forget. I should know it by heart, but I don't. But if you have any trouble, the easiest thing is just to email Beyond Barnard. So Beyond Barnard at barnard.edu, and say you'd like help getting on to Handshake, and generally either Eric or Claire on our team will reach out to you and help you get set up. LinkedIn Premier, how valuable. The general wisdom has always been it's not worth paying for LinkedIn because the features it adds don't tend to help your job search that much. But LinkedIn does keep adding things. So I always say with caution, there might be helpful things. I gave advice to somebody the other day, start using LinkedIn. You're going to get an offer for a free month. And so take your free month. Make sure you put a calendar reminder about renewing, making sure your credit card doesn't get charged in 30 days if you don't like it. Test it out, see if it's helpful, and then decide for yourself whether the added features, the added capability can help you and make it worth it. But generally speaking, a lot of people get a fair amount of LinkedIn without having a paid or a premium package. I had a question about the other side of contacts, having too many. Should I wean people out? I see. I'm not, yeah, I don't know. I haven't given a lot of thought about weaning people out. I certainly think that if you feel like there are, I don't think there's a downside necessarily to having a ton of contacts, except maybe people might reach out to you because they want to connect to that person, and then it can be a little bit embarrassing to say, yeah, I don't even remember who that is. So that could be a reason for weeding it out. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to stop you for it. I think other tasks on LinkedIn are more important, but if you have time or if you, as you go along, find people you want to, get rid of, that's fine. Okay, so eye candy. It's possible to use to call out areas to bulletize. Yeah, I have. I guess I'd be pro eye candy if you've got time, because I have long noted that there's not a lot of editing. There's not a lot of traditionally there hasn't been a lot of ways to edit LinkedIn to make your sections look a little bit more attractive. So if you I think I don't think it's going to make or break whether you get a job, but if it looks better to you, that would be great. As a BC alum, how can I make an appointment with you? You can either join Handshake and search that way, or you can email Beyond Barnard and say, I want to make an appointment with Christine, and someone will get back to you and help set up your account on Handshake and go with that. How about if you're currently a freelancer, there's no photo for being self-employed the way there is when you work for a company with a logo? Is there a way around that? Or just, I don't think it, oh, I see. So are you talking about the little logo that's next to the entry on the experience? I don't think that matters that much if you're thinking about that, but it might be an argument again in favor of putting a banner up that maybe has a photo, a stock photo that sort of shows a little bit of what you do. So if you're a writer, it could be something writing related, etc. I worked at the same company for my entire career and decided to cut off after 20 years, not to age me, as I pivot to my next chapter. Thoughts? Interesting. So in other words, you're just reflecting the last 20 years that you were there, yeah. I worked at the same company for I think that's fine. It's a little tricky when it's been the same company, because then you're kind of in the territory of misrepresenting how long you were there. But Jackie, you always ask tricky questions that I don't have an immediate answer to. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel like in your case that, because I know you and we've talked before, that I think your experience helps you, and especially in what you're thinking about pivoting to and why you're thinking about pivoting to. I would own it. I would not worry too much about, you had a long, distinguished career. I think you should own it. That's my initial thought, but I'm happy to sort of talk this through with you more one-on-one. What do you think of a bio and networking brief as other tools in the process? I'm open to anything. Those sound good. I think a bio can be helpful. Networking brief, I'm not as familiar with that. So, okay. Ooh, nice. FYI, this is an anonymous attendee. I spoke to a LinkedIn representative yesterday about a question about premium, got a 50% off the basic premium subscription plan promotion. Might still be going on. Nice. Yeah, that sounds great. People always give that advice for your phone plan, that if you call them up and ask them questions or say that you're thinking of somebody else, they'll give you a break. So definitely give it a try with LinkedIn. Excellent. All right, I am I'm going to have to cut off now because as always, I'm late to my next thing because you all ask such great questions. But I'll ask, Lindsay can recover some of the questions I might not have gotten to in the chat section. And you always can email me, cshin@barnard.edu as well. So thank you all once again, those of you who hung in here, a lot of you through the whole presentation, and I'll see some of you next week or online and take it from there. Thanks so much, everybody.